And Jerome, is it okay if I look at you when you're speaking?
Yes, that's fine.
And then I look at Jacob when I'm speaking?
That's perfect.
Got it.
No, just talk to Jacob. Actually, act as if Jacob is everyone asking you the question.
All right.
Right.
I mean, if you need me to, you guys gotta help me off the. Okay.
Okay, John's here. I can ask questions.
Let's do one more sync.
Ask the questions. There we go.
One more sync clap.
All right, very good.
We're good? How old were you when you first began playing the piano?
So I was 9 when I had my first lesson. My grandfather was my big inspiration, and I started hearing him play probably from the very beginning of my life. He lived in north central Pennsylvania, so our family was in Kensington, Maryland, and we would drive up there, and I would sit at the foot of his grand piano while he played in absolute awe. So I got a tiny Magnus organ that I would fool around on when I was about 6. But our family lived in a house that was a little too small for a piano. That was in Kensington. So when we moved to Columbia, Maryland in 1969, I was 9 years old, we were able to get a piano, and my grandfather gave us one of his 2 pianos. So I had my first lesson on January 7th. I have no idea why I remember that date. 1970, and I was 9 years old, and fell in love with Chopin almost immediately. So I probably should give you a chance to ask another question.
Actually, you answered a lot of the questions that I had in there.
Oh, good.
But I'll ask questions again.
Yeah, very good, sure.
So, who inspired you to begin playing the piano?
So my first inspiration was my grandfather. He was not professionally a pianist. Our family was, on that side of the family, was a family of ice cream makers, which was a great way to be a kid. When we went up to Pennsylvania, it was always about, family and ice cream. And so that was his profession. But he was a serious pianist avocationally, and a very talented one. And so he would always play for me when we visited. And I would just sit and dream while he played, and longed for my very first lessons. And then finally, when we were in Columbia, I was able to begin lessons.
So outside of him, do you have any other family members that plays the piano?
No. I'll share with you a wonderful memory that at the time I didn't really understand, but was also a moment of it sparked inspiration for me. My family had just moved to Columbia. We had gotten our first piano from my grandfather, and our dad woke my sister and me up in the middle of the night and said, "You've got to hear this. Come downstairs now." So we went downstairs very excited, and our mom, we had never known that she played any piano, but she was sitting at the piano, and she was playing the first few measures of the Paderewski Minuet in G, which has a trill. Those first few measures have a trill. And I had no idea she played. And our dad was so excited when she got to the trill. I remember to this day, he said, "Look at that, look at that." And it was fascinating to see her fingers moving quickly in this trill, and it obviously captivated my dad. And it captivated me too. And so our mom played a little bit, a very little bit, but that was the only time I ever heard her play in our entire lifetime together. I never heard her play again.
And with that motivation eventually getting you to play piano, what was your first amateur performance that you can remember?
My first amateur performance was at Running Brook Elementary School in Columbia, where I went to 5th grade. think I was at that point, let's see, I was 9 when I started, but I turned 10 just a few months later. I was probably still 10, or maybe had just turned 11 when I gave my very first performance. I remember to this day what I played. It was a piece called Aragonaise by Jules Massenet. And so it holds a soft spot in my heart. It was an arrangement of a work, probably for orchestra, maybe even an operatic work, I'm not sure. So that was my first ever performance.
And my first ever performance was Hot Cross Buns.
Very good.
Fast forward to your first professional performance. What
First-
can you tell us about when and how your first professional performance went?
So my first professional performance was actually a performance of chamber music. I was 14, and I was engaged to play with a chamber group. I remember what I played. I played Beethoven's Trio in C minor, Opus 1, number 3. It's a masterpiece. It's an amazing Opus 1. And I played with a very fine violinist and cellist. And it was an amazing experience. We also played a work for for string quartet and piano by a composer named Ernst von Dohnányi. I think he's a Hungarian composer. And that was fun. It was a piano quintet. So the two pieces were some of the most fun I'd ever had. And I determined after that my favorite way of playing was in a piano trio setting, that is piano, violin, and cello. And to this day, I adore playing piano, violin, cello trios. So that was my first ever professional performance.
And where and who you were formally trained to play the piano? Who taught you basically how to play?
Right, so my very first teacher was actually a violinist herself. Her name was Claire Dean. She lived in Baltimore, and she was a marvelous teacher. She intimidated me, which was probably good because I was very unwilling to be unprepared. Well, there was one time when I was unprepared, and boy, did she let me have it. One time, and I knew that had to be the last time. So she was very inspiring in that sense, intimidating. But she also filled me with a real reverence for music. So I can remember, for example, she assigned me one of my first works by Chopin, who was then my favorite composer, and to this day is my favorite composer. But she said, only work on the first page. So she was shrewd, because she knew that I would be so eager to move on that I would really ace that first page. But I was so eager to turn the page, but I was afraid because I was so intimidated. It's like maybe she'd find out that I'd begun the second page. So I was very strict with myself. Don't even touch the second page. She'll know. But then she assigned me the second page, and it was the same thing. Don't you dare touch the third page, Brian. So I aced that second page, and I was given the reward of being able to learn the third page. So she was very, very inspiring. And as I said, she filled me with a deep reverence for music. I then moved on to a woman by the name of Yilda Novik, who was a marvelous, fiery, redheaded Hungarian woman who created in her studio an amazing environment, a fertile environment for growth. So it was kind of like living in a rainforest. You know, there's so much life in a rainforest, it's gonna rub off on you no matter what. And so she had marvelous students, pupil parties. She would have students come and stay with her for 3 or 4 days and have virtually an endless lesson, eat meals with her. And then we would become friends. Some of the closest friendships of my life were formed in her studio. That was at age 12, and I stayed with her till I was 16. And I started entering competitions, and as I mentioned, I had my first professional performance. She connected me with my first management, so I started having more and more opportunities to perform, traveled a fair amount when I was 15, played with orchestras around the country. It was really an exciting, exciting life, and she created this environment, this amazing environment. And then, when I was 16, I moved back to working with a Baltimore-based teacher, a great, great teacher by the name of Leon Fleischer, whom the music world reveres deeply, and studied with him privately for a year and a half. And it was back to the sense of deep reverence. He was such an extraordinary educator, and of course, one of the greatest pianists on the planet, but also one of the greatest teachers on the planet. And he knew how to instill in his students not just a deep awareness of everything that's happening in the music that we play, but also a profound calling. I'll remember, for till the day I die, I asked him a question. What are we doing this for? You know, why do we play? What is our purpose? And he had a beautiful answer. He said, I believe, this is Mr. Fleischer speaking, I believe we play the piano to celebrate our relationship with all that is. It blew my mind. I mean, as I remember to this day, that beautiful statement. And so he instilled in his students a deep sense of calling. What am I doing? I'm celebrating all that is through this great musical literature. So I was very blessed by the three teachers that I had. Phenomenal human beings, musicians, and teachers.
And you mentioned your favorite composer earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong. Chopin?
I fell in love, I was lucky because I fell in love with Chopin's music at a very young age. Within weeks of my first lesson, I started falling in love with Chopin's music. And I would say that love was the fuel in my tank and inspired me to practice when, you know, I might have been outside playing with friends. And I was pretty disciplined as a kid. I'm very grateful to that kid that I was, because I practiced a lot. And so while 9 is a relatively late age to be beginning, if you then go on to have a professional career, because of the wonderful teaching that I received, and this discipline that I have sometimes regretted losing in my adult years, I was able to make up for lost time. And my family was incredibly supportive. They were wonderful, very loving. They believed in what I was doing, and they encouraged me to kind of put all my eggs in one basket, and gave me a lot of support, you know, drove me to my lessons, and it was really, I was blessed. I was very, very lucky in so many ways. And so that love of Chopin was one of the ways that I was lucky. And to this day, Chopin is my favorite composer. I did have a period of teenage rebellion, piano nerd style, when I was, 16, 17. I declared that Sergei Prokofiev was my favorite composer. He was the perfect composer to have kind of a teenage fling with, full of wonderful dissonance and great sense of irony and a lot of rhythmic drive, and I just adore, and I love Prokofiev's music to this day. But I did return to that first love of Chopin, and now am in a wonderful project for which I'm very grateful, playing the complete works. Just playing the complete works of Chopin at the Music Center at Strathmore. And I'll throw in a quick plug, if I may. February 28th is the 14th. That is February 28th of 2025, will be the 14th of the 15 recitals. So nearing the end of the project, warm invitation, come one, come all, at the Music Center at Strathmore, February 28th of the coming year. So that is a dream come true, this opportunity to play everything that Chopin composed. And so that love of Chopin is still the primary fuel in my tank.
The last question. One more thing. And do it, looking at Jacob, tonight I'm playing, and just give the title, and I hope you enjoy it.
Can I talk about the piece a little bit? Briefly, okay. So when the wonderful people at WBAL asked me to participate in this evening's program, I thought immediately of Chopin. What am I going to do? How can I combine Chopin with a seasonal work? And I was a little bit stuck. But then, thanks to some colleagues at St. Mary's College of Maryland who gave me some inspiration, I realized that the wonderful number from Vince Guaraldi's Charlie Brown Christmas, Linus and Lucy, is in the same key as one of my favorite Chopin etudes, the Aeolian Harp Etude. So I figured out a way to morph from one to the other in a smooth way, and sometimes I'm playing the left-hand part of Linus and Lucy, the right-hand part of the Aeolian Harp Etude, and it's a lot of fun, and I very much hope you all enjoy it. So can I say one more thing? With thanks to my colleagues at St. Mary's College of Maryland, with thanks to Peabody, where I used to teach and had 20 plus wonderful years, for letting us record in this lovely Griswold Hall, and with apologies to Vince Guaraldi and Frédéric Chopin, but most of all with a very warm Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all our listeners. Here is Linus and Lucy and Freddie. Hope you enjoy it.